for the next cycle. Anybody have any questions about HPAC?
I see one in the chat. Would you like me to read it to you?
Oh, I see it. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Should we attend an HPAC information session the year that we're going to apply or the year before? Kavita, that's a really good question. You definitely have to attend the year you apply. I will say that. But we welcome juniors and seniors to attend an HPAC information session just to see what it's like, to see what they can expect. But we'll restart those in fall 2021. So if you haven't attended one and you're thinking, I want to go through HPAC in the future, you're welcome to attend one before you're ready. It's just you'll absolutely have to attend one the year you're going to apply, because things change. Like this year, we're allowing transfer students to go through, so if you hadn't attended the HPAC information session, that student might not know that. You're welcome.
I just have a quick question also about HVAC, because I'm not like super familiar with like the purpose of it. Is it like something that is going to be required by a majority of places that you apply to, or is it like more of an optional thing? Because I'm probably going to take a gap year, so I don't know like if not having a letter from, or like not going back and getting a letter from the school, if I get one, would be like detrimental or anything like that.
That's a really good question. I'm actually attending a huge meeting with a bunch of Atlantic area pre-health offices on Monday to find out if they're still doing HPAC. The vast majority of schools that I know of are still offering HPAC like a committee letter or something called composite letter, which is very similar. It's just you don't have an interview. It's not necessarily detrimental, but some schools, medical schools, will say they expect a committee letter if your school offers it. I'll use one example where when I first started here almost 3 years ago, University of Maryland's Dean of Admissions emailed me to find out why XYZ student didn't have a committee letter. Well, it turns out that student did their graduate program here, so he wouldn't have qualified even under this new rule anyway. But that was somebody who knew that we had a committee letter, that they reached out and asked why the student didn't get it. If you decide not to go through with it, Cal and I write letters of support, which is kind of almost like a letter of recommendation. It summarizes some of your qualities and experiences and says that we support you in this process, but you did not go through HPAC this cycle. Insert reason here. I will say, Marissa, if you were planning on taking a gap year, we see alumni. I think that out of all the people who have applied to HPAC, the vast majority of them are actually alumni. So we will keep working with you.
Okay, yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks. Really quick, if anyone else has a question, feel free to jump in. But in terms of like, say you try and go through the process and then you don't get it, like, or would you encourage people that like don't get the letter to like apply anyway? Or like,
that's a good question. You're asking the hard-hitting questions, which is great. It's very subjective to the student, right? So it's hard to say, like students will still apply sometimes without the letter.
Like acknowledging that they don't have it, or like just not bringing it up, I guess.
Well, they don't necessarily acknowledge they don't have it unless they need to acknowledge they don't have it. So okay. Like I've worked with a student who I wrote a letter of support for somebody who I'd worked with for a while. They didn't get the letter. And, if I'm being honest, it was GPA related and a little bit of not having experience. And there's that coaching piece that comes with advising where we might say, what if you took an additional year? Is it worth $5,000 to apply to medical school this cycle? Or if you took, 2 gap years and did, a post-bac or did something else, would that help you? That's not always the conversation we have, and it's also if the student's receptive to that. But for that, I write a letter of support. I have it saved for any student who needs it. And if that student wants to go through with the process, I will have that letter ready to be sent off in case they need that letter. But that student might also may not target schools that are looking for a committee letter. They might look at DO schools if they're interested in osteopathic medicine and that philosophy, or they might look at a little bit lower ranked med schools Maybe med schools not on the East Coast. East Coast med schools do like committee letters, I will say. So that is just a conversation that we'd have. Those are just like very hypothetical situations.
Okay, yeah, and sorry, really quick, like a
Yeah, go for it.
follow-up question. Like in terms of, I'm not sure if you have like statistics on it, or is this like a process where like majority people usually make it through, or is it relatively selective and like,
You mean how many people get a letter?
yeah, like in terms of how many people like apply, or is it like one of those things that like, relatively low bottleneck or?
I'd say, okay, so out of, I don't know if I'm, out of last year, I think we had about 77 applicants. I will say the majority of those students got a letter.
Okay, cool.
Now, did the majority of those students apply? No. And there's a lot of reasons why. You might have friends they couldn't get an MCAT, but yeah, I mean, the
Yeah.
majority of students who apply are people that we've worked with, and that's why we have a check-in in the fall to be like, are you 100% sure you're here and ready to go? And even if the student isn't 100% sure and they're ready to go and they do it anyway, and we have that conversation, keep going and talking, and they're like, I might not get a letter, but I just want to try. That's also fair. People do that, but I think the vast majority of students who do apply, at least lately, get a letter.
Okay, thank you.
And I see 2 questions. Are there resources to help prepare for an HPAC interview? Yes, career services. I can't stress that enough. You can sign up through Handshake to meet with Katie Green. She's also hired a 4th year, I think she's a 4th year med student, to help with interview prep and personal statements as well. And even after the pandemic, if alumni are out of state, interviews will still be virtual. Yes. When Cal and I started HPAC even I'll say last year, we tried to encourage students who were out of state to not drive to see us. That didn't really sit well with people the first year we did HPAC. This past cycle, before we went on remote with the pandemic, we said if you are out of state or cannot get off work to make it, your interview will automatically be virtual. We don't want, and that is something that we want students to know that will continue. Because regardless of the pandemic or not, it's so expensive to get from point A to point B, and you got to save your money for interviews should they go back to actual in-person for future medical and dental schools as well. Because right now, all interviews for medical and dental schools have been virtual too. Good questions. And we're accommodating too. So if there's something that's needed to be done, you just need to let us know.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
So this relates to something you just said about like an HPAC example. So you said like students might choose to like not go through with it because they didn't get an MCAT score. Does that mean like essentially they were going to take the MCAT but didn't feel ready for it?
There's 2 sides to that. Good to see you. It depends. I mean, this year's weird, right? This past year. So I've had students who might not have gotten a really good MCAT score or the score they wanted. And they're like, I think I need more time to study, because studying while you're in school can be challenging with the MCAT. The other side of that was there's some students, HPAC or not, who couldn't get an MCAT test date because of COVID. And the AMCAS people did as much as they could to try to, help students with that. But I mean, even this past weekend with the unrest in DC, there were exams that were canceled. So then students have to find another date to schedule it. So, there's those testing nuances that are something that we've never seen before are now just being a challenge. So it really depends, it's either I didn't get the score I wanted and I know I need more time. That's certainly the case, or the pandemic and impacted my ability to get to a testing site.
Mm-hmm. So if we wanted to apply for this cycle, like what's like the latest MCAT test date that we'd be able to go through and still apply for this cycle?
The ironic thing is you can apply all the way up until, for some medical and dental schools, like November 1st, 2021. Would I recommend that? Absolutely not. I want our students to try to be early and on time. And for me, that means around June 1st, June 3rd, your AMCAS application opens for submission. so, or your DO application opens in May. So you want to be in the first round, which means ideally you take your MCAT or your DAT by April. So that way you have your score by May, and you can fine tune your list. Sure, that doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room to retake it, say in July, because if you do, you could still apply without the MCAT score, honestly. Or you can apply with the score you have and say that you anticipate having a new score, but you're going to be looked at in a second or third tier of applicants moving forward.
So it's like a rolling basis kind of admission.
Yeah, but I wouldn't anticipate that, right? So even if say, I don't remember the date, but say GW School of Medicine, if their deadline for application is November 1, I wouldn't say you apply October 31st. I would probably say even applying September is risky because they've already vetted applicants from earlier in the summer to interview them. So it's risky to apply late.
Okay.
It's financially risky too, because it's an investment in yourself.
Makes sense. All right, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I see, what are some clinical opportunities that you would recommend because of the pandemic? So our med school is expecting less hours. None. I think that 90% of our appointments right now are about clinical. And I have to be honest, the hardest conversations are to just say, we can't recommend it. We can't recommend these in-person opportunities. We've got new variants of the virus. We have people on lockdown, in different areas of the country who might not all have access to, good healthcare, or, they might be living with their parents. We don't want students to put themselves or their loved ones at risk. That's the thing of it. There are students that might have an EMT training, or they are a scribe, or they are working as an MA and have been and were able to keep that position. That is lucky in a sense, but by no means do Cal and I at all recommend any in-person activities because this is a public health crisis. So we don't want to see y'all get sick or infect others. And so our med school is expecting less hours from students interested in the next few years. They haven't told us that. We had a DO panel in December, and the DO schools said they expect students to be active in the process. So virtual shadowing. So you bring in guest speakers who are doctors or maybe researchers, and you can write down those hours that you've done. Are they going to make or break the bank in terms of clinical? To be determined yet. But what we're telling students is those virtual shadowing opportunities, please don't pay for them, but those virtual shadowing opportunities are at least showing that you're active in the process. It's just because the clinical experiences just aren't there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I just didn't know how to approach it because I've been doing research, and luckily it's in person, but I'm also at home, so I won't be able to keep that up eventually once I move to campus. So it's like
the fact that you have that, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like you have, in-person research, which is not easy to come by. I think it's even more limited than clinical. So I mean, but we're not expecting students to do those opportunities either. I mean, should we? I don't have any news on that, but returning to campus in the fall semester, we have no way of knowing if, say, GW will open up their hospital volunteer program, which is 90% of you, is something we would say, go do that, sign up to be a volunteer, or go Capital Caring First, which is the hospice organization in the city. There's no way to know what that's going to look like until we get back to things, not normal. It's not even the new normal, but just back to campus in some capacity on what is going to be available for students. So in the interim, it's going to be virtual shadowing and virtual opportunities. If you're looking for research, email your professors. Look and see if they need any help, even if it's just looking at slides to try to find some variants, visually, or doing any type of data crunching. Literature reviews might sound boring, but it's something that you can practice, especially if you go into, a more research affiliated PhD program with an MD, or you scrap medical, dental, and whatever all together and go into a funded PhD program. So it's good practice that way too. But the important thing is you want to reach out to your professors. I met with a student earlier, and we talked about how do we find doctors to even ask questions about their why. call your family physician if you haven't done that. If you're connected at all to the medical field, ask whoever that person is to connect you with some other medical professionals so you can just set up a phone chat. You can also try to connect with people on LinkedIn. It can be tricky. I'm bad at LinkedIn. Like, I don't check my messages because I'm not looking for a job, but you know, some people might be more responsive to LinkedIn messaging. So that's something you could try as well.
Oh, actually,
Yeah, I'll definitely look into that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
sorry, I wanted to add into that as well because we've been able to get 2 new researchers for our symposium, but the spots were filled already. And so I was able to contact one of my current professors about her research. And I know that one of the AMPC members got our list of GW research labs and contacted her and is now working at her lab. And so she told me that instead of being directly related to our symposium, she will be accepting 2 students from AMPC to be part of her lab, but you have to email her, and along with the email include your resume or transcript so that she knows who you are a little bit better and talks to you first. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, and I'll send her email in the chat for you guys. And some information about her as well, if you need it. Yeah, and then, oh, also, I'm sorry. If any of you want any templates for how to reach out to a researcher and asking to be part of their laboratory, just let us know because we have made one and we can send it to you as well. Yeah, sorry.
That's great.
I just had another quick question. I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize.
Thanks. I did like in my sophomore year, I had like a federal work study job where I was like basically tech support. How do you feel about like, I'm not sure like if that was just like wasted time in terms of like the pre-med process, or like is that something I should like put anywhere or something I should just not include anywhere if I apply or when I apply?
I mean, I did tech support in college and it was on my resume up until, you know, I didn't need it anymore. I think it's a valuable thing to highlight that you worked in whatever field and went to school full time and still did XYZ activities. It shows, you know, hard work and dedication to something. So, I mean, I do think if you can add it to your resume, you should. It's not wasted time.
Okay, even though if it's like not, it's not medically or peripherally medically related, that's
Doesn't
still like,
matter.
okay.
It would be other experience. I mean, like, if you think about like non-clinical community service, you don't have to do GW Red Cross or something, you know, you don't have to do 110 Health to give back to your community. You can be a tutor, like free tutor, obviously. You can, you know, work
Yeah.
in trail support and things like that. So those are things that students should still add to their resume because it's relevant to showing that you are active as a student. Tech support's great. I mean, it doesn't have to be pre-med all the time.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. You would put like as other experience, you know what I mean? Like, because you would highlight your resume. GW's Career Services has great resume templates. They can help you work on how to craft that, but it
Yeah.
would be other experience.
Okay, cool. Cause I've like worked at a restaurant too for a couple years, so I didn't know
Again,
like if that was something I should include or like I didn't want there to be like a gap in the timeline.
well, that's the thing. Like, if you had nothing for 2 years and then all of a sudden you've got clinical, are they going to want to see that you did nothing kind of like for first year and sophomore, you know? So I think it's important to show that you were an active student. And if that meant you were working 2 jobs, like you still did 2 jobs and maintain your grades and did XYZ stuff on campus. So it's all relevant. You know, there comes a point when you might remove it from your resume because you shouldn't have multiple pages or something, you know, but for now you want to work with career services to make sure you have it added on.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Does transcription for the National Archives? Yep, that counts. So you can, anybody, I could do it if I wanted to, can sign up to be a National Archives transcriber with the Smithsonian, and it is community service because you're giving your time. It's part of your class. Yes, in a sense, like that shouldn't be the only thing we do, but it's great. I actually love that your class is doing that. You can continue it though. So you might have X number of hours for UW 1020. And maybe it's something you continue to do a couple hours every other week or so moving forward to show kind of consistency in the community service. We tell students not to use or rely. There's other classes. I think there's like a lower level BISC course that has community service component, and we tell students not to rely on that to be the bulk of their service. Just like if a student's in a fraternity or sorority, there's philanthropy as part of that. That's a requirement. Or if you're an athlete, you have philanthropy with that too. We don't want you to rely just on that. So it's going above and beyond, but sure, that's a good start. So community service also means giving back. So like volunteering for Upchieve to be a tutor, that's giving back to the community. That's an example. Have you all heard of Engage DC? I might have given this to some people in a chat while we were meeting. It's through the Nashman Center. I'm just going to put it in the chat again. You can sign the interest form. It still says fall, but I'm pretty sure they're still accepting people for the spring semester that to get connected and get partnered with a local DC organization. It's virtual. So it just helps you to give back. And then fingers crossed, returning, you know, that is an organization you can continue to work for as a volunteer moving forward. Other questions?
I think I do have a question.
Yep.
I think it would help most of us, hopefully. We notice sometimes in the pre-health path that there's a lot of competition. And I was just wondering, what advice do you have for pre-med students that are in very competitive environments, like in classes or outside of classes even?
And I mean, personally, I feel like I remove that competition during my appointments. I don't try to stack anybody up against another person and be like, well, so-and-so. The only time I might say that it was like, here's an example of somebody who got XYZ experience while doing XYZ at the same time, you know, but that is not a competitive thing. I think as we get older, we learn to remove that ability, that feeling of needing to compare ourselves with others. I get the question a lot, how do I stack up against blah, blah, blah? You can look that up online. I rarely bring up statistics on the average GPA and the average MCAT and the number of applicants versus the number that get in at national level, because that is just kind of setting a not a positive tone. I think one thing you can think about is trying to reframe what you can do and what you can control versus what, you know, Lindsay, I don't think we have any Lindsays, that's my wife's name, what Lindsay is doing in her class, in the same class I'm in versus what I'm doing. So it's more so what's in my scope of control right now. This takes practice, you know, because it is a hyper competitive field. You're oftentimes competing with each other for research or in the future clinical experience, things like that. So it's more so trying to reframe your mindset on not comparing ourselves to others and doing what is in the best scope of your ability.
That's great. Thank you.
Not easy, I know, but it's a practice. It's a mindset, a method. You know, we, even as adults, Cal and I can tell you that we think that way sometimes too. So we have a question about the PA. Ooh, PA application. Are there any tips to preparing early? So it depends on the PA application. You know, most of that is a 1-year cycle. Some of there are some like spring start date PA applications that are out there, what we call like a rolling admission. So it's very much going to depend on where you want to apply. One thing, and this is actually holds true for other health professions, especially if you're thinking accelerated nursing or you know, physical therapy or something like that too, is when you use a directory to find PA programs that fit your bill, you want to create a spreadsheet. And it's very, it seems like homework, but it's good homework. You want to like list the schools, link the website, put if there's any weird nuance prereqs that you might not have taken in your field of study and what those courses might be. So like some PA programs might be like, please take genetics. You want to make sure you do that. Or please take medical terminology. That's a common one. Then you want to list common GPA, GRE, you know, what the GRE score is. You know, do they require how many letters of recommendation, et cetera, and when the application is due. Because if there's those nuanced ones that might have a rolling date or something like that, you want to mark it. Preparing early would mean your personal statement, you know, calculating the number of clinical hours you need. A lot of times PA programs, this could change, but they're still saying clinical is very important, right? So if anybody attended our PA presentation with the GWPA program this past fall semester, their admissions folks were talking about, you know, like, yeah, understandably, people did not get to keep their clinical experience. I don't know how they're going to evaluate clinical moving forward, you know, with that, but it's calculating the number of hours and seeing if it matches up to at least the minimum of what's required there. And then you think about the GRE, if your program requires it, which most of them do, you know, we usually say like 3 months or so, depending on your schedule to study for that, planning that out in enough time that you get your score back so that way you know where to apply. So it's usually an application that's a year-long process. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
You're welcome. And when you're looking at PA programs now, see if they're offering any virtual open houses. A lot of them are. So try to attend an open house, answer any to ask any questions you might have to. Good to see you. Have a good one. How long do you need to prepare for the MCAT? That's a good question. It depends on the student. Experts tell us 6 to 8 months. You don't want to overstudy because there's a period of time when you hit a point where if you study too much, you're not going to make it with the MCAT. But usually experts say 6 to 8 months.
6 to 8 months of like studying a couple hours a day, or?
Yeah, I mean, you can't, I mean, there are people who might cram that study method into a 2-month period where they're doing nothing but MCAT the whole time.
Got you.
There's all kinds of resources out there on mapping out when you should study. Like there's free templates. You can create a spreadsheet, you know, of mapping out like, all right, I'm studying chemistry in the morning for 2 hours and then I'm going to have a break and then I'm going to study bio for 2 hours and then I'm going to watch Netflix, you know. So it's very much finding your own method. When should you start studying for the MCAT? It really depends on when you're planning on taking the MCAT. So if a student is planning on taking it in April of this year, hopefully they started studying sometime last fall semester. I can't do the math off the top of my head. But they hopefully have started studying sometime in this past fall. We don't necessarily recommend any paid resources just because not everybody can afford them and we don't want to put a burden on someone. The only paid resource that I know of that has been talked highly from people who have gotten into med school, students I know personally, has been something called UWorld. It's like a flashcard test bank that changes every once in a while. You can do it on your phone. It's meant to supplement the free resources on AMCAS because AMCAS will give you those free resources, free test prep and things like that too. Timeline for juniors and seniors, what they should be doing. Do you have any sort of timeline for underclassmen as well? So this changes now because of the pandemic. So no matter who you are at this moment in time, the only thing I can recommend you be doing is virtual experiences. So virtual shadowing, not paid, don't pay for it. Virtual community service, being involved on campus virtually, which, you know, obviously with this club and other campus organizations as well. If your research is something we usually defer to second year students anyway, we don't want to see first year students getting research. In a perfect world, if you're a first year student on campus, we would say time to start exploring, join campus clubs. That's it. You know, first semester, join campus clubs. Over winter break, you would have started maybe shadowing your doctor once or twice. And then spring is when you would kind of look for those shadowing and clinical opportunities in person. But that's kind of null and void at this point because of the pandemic. So the focus really is on any type of virtual experiences that you all can find. Oh, respectable. Oh, Elton, you asked don't want to tell you. So every school has a range. If I was on my laptop, I would pull up something called MSAR. Have you all heard of the MSAR for our pre-meds? It's a database. If we ask people to pay for anything, like that is something that students find as a good investment. It's a way to explore medical schools all in one space. And they actually have, like, it'll say GW School of Medicine, range MCAT. It'll say University of Maryland, range MCAT, Rutgers, range MCAT. So there's a range, right? And it can be huge. I mean, I've seen ranges from 502 to 519 for one med school. Like, who is that 502 person? To me, that person was probably like amazing clinical, amazing GPA, amazing community service, and probably solid research, right? There's an average MCAT score nationally is about 511, 512. But that doesn't mean if you don't get it, and that's why we hate telling people, like, you can Google it, right? But if you don't get that MCAT score, it doesn't make you less than, it just makes us have to be strategic. Where do we apply? What range are you falling in? Because that's why using the MSAR is helpful. If we're saying, man, my MCAT's 507 and I am not in this specific range for UMass, where should I apply there? I don't know, because if you're not falling in the specific range, it could be risky to put your money in that, you know, because you're not in that range group. If you schedule an appointment with either Calendar or I, we can pull up our MSAR on our computer to show you what it looks like. I'm notoriously bad at passwords, so it's saved on my computer downstairs. So I would hate to mess that up. But if you schedule an appointment, we can explore that. You're welcome. It's a good question. I mean, you can definitely find a lot of information on those averages, like average GPA, like 3.7 something, you know. But again, the beauty and the complicated thing of both the med school and dental school process is there's no absolutes. There's ranges for all of it. You know, PA, similar in a sense, you know, there's ranges there as well. Any other questions?
So I know like sometimes people think like being in a sorority or like a fraternity has like a negative connotation, especially when you're applying to med school. Like, I'm not sure if like any of those experiences would actually like, help on the application when it comes to like soft skills. I know, like, how can you like phrase that on your application or like explain that to someone, like why you joined like a social club like that, and how
Well,
it will help you like in the future.
I guess that I haven't experienced any pushback mentioning Greek life to others, you know, talking at admissions and things like that. So you might be hearing that on sub channels of the internet. I'm not sure. But for me, like, I'm part of a sorority, you know, and what I got out of it was a lot of community service. You know, being a chair of a committee, you know, I never wanted to be president of it, but, you know, being a secretary, keeping notes and things like that. So holding leadership responsibilities. Maybe in your sorority, you take charge of the philanthropy chair, you get elected to that. And then you say, 10 hours, X number of weeks is not enough. Let's do more philanthropy, especially for the pre-meds in this group, you know? So I think there's ways to phrase your experience in the Greek life very well, you know? I mean, are there negative associations? Sure. Has that been brought up to me by anybody in admissions? No. That's not to say it doesn't exist, but that's why you don't just sit there in it, you know? I think that's why you kind of make a name for yourself in the organization that you're a part of. Because all student orgs have a social element to it, to be honest, you know, in a sense. So it's if it's Greek life, you know, I'm not saying you have to be president, but maybe running or maybe taking on an office or a responsibility or a committee or a project shows leadership skills. And if you look at the 15 core competencies, which I apply to not only med, but dental accelerated nursing programs, PA, vet, you name it. Those are skills that all of these pre-health, these health organizations and schools are looking at. Leadership is on there. So it's a way to develop your leadership skills.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're
That
welcome.
like clarified something for me because I always like was under the assumption there's like the possibility, but I haven't like heard anything specific. It seemed like more of like the internet type of thing that like comes up and you're like, what activities to do for med school? And
yeah, I
then
mean,
it comes up like that.
I look at Student Doctor Network and subreddits just to see what you all might be seeing. So I have seen those rumblings, but again, like, I mean, in my conversations with med schools, has anybody specifically said something negative to me about Greek life? No. Does it mean it's not existing? I mean, it could, but I'm not saying it's the wrong choice to be in a Greek life. I mean, I enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it. It's just, can you carve a name for yourself and be a leader in the group? That goes for whatever group you're in too. It could be this group. Yes. All right. Other questions?
Do you have any advices on what students could do or I think we have a question in the chat and then I'll ask mine. Sorry.
I'm not very familiar with Handshake. Is that a useful tool to definitely utilize? Yeah. Elton, so Career Services Handshake tool is something that unfortunately I can't see it. So I can't see what you see, but it's a way to schedule appointments with career services, coaches, resume reviews, interview prep, things like that. Paid clinical is posted on there, sometimes either through GW or outside places. Research also. Community service is not where I would go on Handshake. Community service is probably going to be the Engage DC that I sent through the Nashman Center. That's for GW affiliated community service. When you get here tomorrow, take a look at the website, and check it out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry. So
That's okay.
What advices do you have for students who are planning to take a gap year? And what do you think that whatever the health related schools that the students are applying to are looking for throughout this 1 year or 2 years?
So we, by and large, do see most students take at least one enhancement year. Gap year, enhancement year, interchangeable. Enhancement year kind of makes it feel more positive. I think that for us, if students do that, we want them to remain active and kind of plug in any gaps they might find in their application. And that's going to be subjective to a student, right? It's not a universal do this. So one student might not have had research. So then they got research at NIH or FDA or Children's National, or got a really cool research position as a post-bac at GW, it just depends. Another student might not have had a lot of clinical experience. So they become an EMT and then they spend, they work doing whatever and they're EMTs on the side on a weekend because just a lot of it's volunteer. But I think the biggest thing you can do is it depends on what bubble you're in, right? If you're doing non-clinical related research, volunteer at your local hospital on a weekend and do community service. That's not part of the hospital. If you're doing clinical, it's hard to get research sometimes after school. So you might be able to jump into some clinical research at your local, if you're doing like, say you're a scribe, maybe your doctor that you've become friendly with might need you to do lit review or something like that. Maybe that's an option, but at least you would do community service on the side. So I think it's just trying to be active in the process as much as possible. And the flip coin to that could be that post-bac, which is subjective to the student. So we know that's something that's a case-by-case basis that we talk about.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So in terms of like, I guess like, I don't want to say checking all the boxes, but like, say someone is relatively strong or likes say clinical way more than research and they don't have a ton of research experience, like barely any, would you recommend just going all in clinical or something, or would you recommend that someone evens it out a little bit?
It's a good question. It's definitely like a conversation we'd want to have. Like research is kind of like, if you think about like the Great British Baking Show, research is the decoration on that piece of cake. You know, like your clinical and your community service, your GPA, your experiences, your character, your things, like that all kind of makes up the base layer. And then research is kind of the icing. Some med schools might see it at the best part, you know, because of what that med school, when you use the MSAR, you'll see this is a stretch for all of us mostly, but Johns Hopkins, for example, 98% of their applicants have research because they're research oriented, right? But research might not be that top tier for Eastern Virginia Medical School. I'm pulling that out. I think I know that they want research, right? But so it's like, if you look at the ranges, like it's just very dependent. So I would say, even if you don't like research a lot, try to give it a shot, you know. There's no harm in trying. But that's something, Marissa, you could have that conversation with Count and I on like the best way to approach it.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And then we have, in case of a gap year, when would the applicant start applying for med schools and take the MCAT? Should they apply before or after the gap year? So it depends on how many gap years you want. So if, pretend I'm a pre-med student and I'm a senior. If I want just one gap year, then I'm taking the MCAT in April and I'm applying to med school in June. And then ideally by then I would have had all of my ducks in a row, so to speak. And my application would say, my intended job is to be doing dry lab clinical research at NIH for this enhancement year. So that is just the one gap year scenario for if you're a senior. But again, it's very subjective. There's not a right, wrong, magic answer. You're welcome. Other questions?
So I know there's some additional like classes you could probably take as a pre-med. I know like there's some recommended like on the website, but would you take those additional classes more based off what you're interested in? Or, like what you want to do like after med school? Like would you take like more like microbiology if you want to go into like research or something versus like genetics if you like know what you want to do, more genetics related in med school? Because or would that depend like what schools you apply to, or how do like med school like view those extra classes really?
It's D, all the above. So here's the kicker is say I'm going to use pretend I'm a public health student, for example, and I've only taken just the core prereqs for medicine, and I want to get a better BCPM, and say, University of Maryland wants me to take genetics and microbiology. I don't know if they do. I'd have to look it up, but we'll pretend for this. Then maybe I add on a bio minor. So then I take all 4 of the classes that we recommend on our website. That is very subjective and to each their own. And that's a conversation you can have with Cal and I, email or an appointment if that's the route you want to go. But the reason why we recommend those 4 courses is because the vast majority of medical and dental schools might recommend or require. And the rule of thumb is sometimes if they take the time to recommend it, maybe take it. It could be between you and Lindsay, she might have genetics and you don't. That's kind of it boils down to that. The MSAR list all the classes that are required for each med school. Strange thing is some schools say organic chemistry 1 and 2 recommended. And you're like, but I have to take it because I need to be successful in the MCAT and every other school says it's required. It's weird that some schools kind of take that approach in saying, because there's no way you could be successful in medical school unless you take organic chemistry, right? So that's why we say that, and there's other classes students might find interesting too that are not going to be part of that BCPM or those bio courses that we put on our website, like the emergency medical scribe class, or when we get back into some type of in-person learning, like the EMT course. Milken has offered the medical terminology class in the past, like that's a cool class to get to learn some medical terms. Those classes might enhance your experience in the future, but they don't necessarily go into that science math GPA. So those bio classes are something that a bio major or neuroscience major will get more than likely, but not everybody does. So that's also something that, you know, you just have to think about. And a lot of times when people go to med school and they think, I'm going to go into XYZ, that doesn't always happen based on residency. Can you touch a bit? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that clarifies it, but I just want to just double check. I'm pretty sure it isn't, but I know public health courses, they aren't a part of the BCPM GPA.
Correct, they are not.
Okay, just want to like double check. I'm a public health major, so I just want to make sure like all my pre-med courses would be like totally different. Cause I know like I listed pre-med concentration. Like,
yeah, you're
on my
going to
degree map so far.
Yeah,
so
your
that,
pre-med concentration is going to capture those basic prereqs.
Okay.
And then if you're interested, say you do want to do genetics research at GW, or you might already be doing it, I don't know, like taking the genetics class is part of your BCPM. Like it shows that you can handle bio at an upper level.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Think about that.
Yeah, schedule a point with myself for Cal, and we can talk about adding those into your 4-year plan if you want. But I guarantee that some of the med schools you might want to apply to, and this goes for everybody, are going to ask for one of those classes. Or something totally random, like computer science. I can't remember the med school that I was like, why are they asking for that? They must have a reason, but I think it was in Illinois, but I can't remember. So there's sometimes weird nuances like that. Like the interesting thing about the MSAR again is that Johns Hopkins, like, you know, at one point listed they want students with unique talents and abilities. Does that mean they'll accept me because I play the clarinet? Maybe. Maybe I play the clarinet with, you know, the GW marching, well, the GW, you know, pep band. You know, that's a unique talent and ability that maybe that'll help me. So there's just weird things in all your applications too. Like, you know, PA, they're looking for a specific type of student. They'll probably listen on their website. Can you touch a bit about post-bac programs? Is it more of a program you apply for as an upperclassman or subjective as an individual? Bit confused. It's confusing. So it's not a thing that you would apply to as part of your undergraduate experience, Elton. So that's, you know, you don't have to worry about, do I apply for this and do this as a junior, senior? The post-bac world is complicated. There's about 350 plus post-bac programs. Here's how they work. There's undergraduate post-bacs. They're kind of like graduate level post-bacs, but they are undergrad courses. So you're a person like me who has not taken any of the prereqs for medicine or dentistry or PA, and I need to take bio 1 and 2, orgo, chem, all that. That's a program I would apply for. A good example of that, if you're looking just to see what see what it is University of Maryland Science in the Evening. GW has a post-bac program that does all those undergraduate prereqs. Those are programs you apply to after you graduate. Then there's Masters of Science, insert fancy title here. And that is a 1 or 2 year master's degree or certificate program, that record enhancer that shows medical schools or dental schools or PA or what have you, that you can handle classes at a graduate level, fast pace. So a good local example would be the Masters of Sciences in Anatomical Sciences at GW. So you can Google that. That's a record enhancer for graduate level students. Something to look at. Then there's the SMP, so the Special Masters in Physiology. The closest one we have is Georgetown. They're the oldest in the country, and that's usually a 1-year program where you are taking some classes alongside medical students, and they are very fast-paced. They have some components in them. On a good year, they might actually have clinical, but I don't think that's happening at the moment. And you know, Georgetown has a good success rate of getting students into medical school 1 to 2 years after they complete that SMP program. That's all over their website on their statistics. So it's really going to depend, like, you know, subjective to the student. What would I need is a science in the evening or a fast-paced undergraduate courses to get myself to med school? Or have I already taken all of those, but I don't think my GPA is where I want it to be? Then maybe I look at an SMP or a master's of science. But that is something we'd want to talk about kind of offline for whoever is listening and wants to consider it, because they're expensive. And they're not a guarantee. There's none of this is a golden ticket, which is the unfortunate thing in the whole process, right? But so it's like, how do you put your money where it's going to go, like take you somewhere when you're looking? And if you're thinking just looking this weekend, looking at a master's or an SMP, do they have robust advising? Do they have placement? Do they offer automatic interviews, or at least, auto acceptance to their medical school if they're affiliated, like a Drexel program? What are their ties to feeding schools? That's what you're looking at if you're exploring that. And then I always ask the question whenever I meet with somebody from one of these programs is, what will I do with this degree if I don't go to medical or dental or PA?
Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Because you want to put your money where you need it. And if you decide not to do this one day, you have a bad clinical experience, you're done, but you're 2 semesters into this master's degree and you want to finish it, you want to know what you can do with that. So
yeah, I'll probably like in the future want to like talk about it more like privately in depth, because like I don't know, I was just like looking it up and like I was really curious.
Yeah, I mean, there's appeals to them. Some of them are appealing. It just really depends on the student.
Right.
Any other questions?
I don't know how much time you have left, but I just had a really, really quick question about your opinion in general about the application process. In terms of putting together an application, I've seen a bunch of like different stuff on the internet saying you should kind of have a theme or some sort of
like
clear
a narrative.
Yeah, like some sort of clear like thing that you are. But then a lot of the other stuff is like, oh, you got to have like a little bit of everything. I guess just in your experience, is there anything particular that you think is common among people that are successful?
There's not a common theme with applicants. I attended a couple sessions with the National Pre-Health Advising Organization, and we actually looked at applicants and like cover letters and personal statements, because they were from a range, like PA to nursing to med and dental. And some people might have loved what one person wrote and the other person hated it. The strange thing is, you're going to have an application that is going to be screened more than likely on some metrics first, and then you're going to have readers who read through it, and you're never going to appeal to all of them. Because what I like to read is different from what Callan likes to read. I think. I don't know. I'd have to ask her. But assuming that, maybe she likes something different than I do. But as an HPAC person who reads these applications, what I'm looking for is not necessarily like a narrative, unless that's your writing style. And Katie Green in Career Services will kind of say this to you too. Like, unless your writing style is from the English minor you might have, or creative writing, and that's how you actually write, don't try to appease one specific person, because it's not going to work. I always say that you all want to have your authentic voice, and it doesn't necessarily mean, if your authentic voice is that narrative or that way of speaking and that way of writing, so be it. But if your authentic voice is kind of getting directly to the point, that's okay too. It just has to make sense. And I think one thing that Katie Green will touch upon when she meets with students for personal statements is always reflecting back to the purpose. So why PA? Why medicine? Why dentistry? Those are just some things to consider. It doesn't necessarily have to have this grandiose theme throughout your application.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's good to know, because I'm definitely not there.
Meet with Career Services and just talk about it. Callan and I cannot review your all's personal statements, because we read personal statements for HPAC. So we don't want to cross that line. I might read a post-bac personal statement. That's fine. But that's because I'm not doing any post-bac, evaluating. But but from the admission, the applicant standpoint for other things, we just don't read those because we want you to go through career services.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I'll just say, I really appreciated all y'all tonight. This was great. I'm happy to do this again as, end of the semester. If you start having questions, we can put this on the calendar. Callan can join too, if you want her to. She would be happy to do that. I told her about this very last minute and she's like, "You're doing what?" I was like, "Sorry, it's Friday at 5, but whoops." But I know that she would also be happy to join in the future too, so we can both kind of give you our input from what we're seeing. Maybe by May we'll have more of those answers on the clinical hours that med schools and PA programs are looking at. We might have more insight on what opportunities might be available to you in the future semesters, or what trends we might be seeing. So that is certainly something we'd be happy to share with you later on.
That would be amazing. Yeah, I think that perhaps in April-ish, I think it'd be
April, because I think that your last week of class is in April, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So Natalia, we can work on a time for me to put that on the calendar just so it doesn't conflict with registration for the fall semester.
True. And maybe having Katie Green as well. Could be helpful, so she could focus a lot more on the personal statement aspect of it.
Yeah, I will shoot her a message and see if she would be interested in joining us because she can answer some of those other questions about common trends that she's seen with, personal statements from across the board. So that would be great if she can join. This is the only beauty of being virtual, right? We don't have to all convene in a room and try to work around everybody's schedules. We can be doing this from the comfort of our home. So I'm appreciative that we were able to get this time.
Yeah, thank you so much for spending time. I just had a real quick question also. In terms of like tagging up with you or like other pre-med advisors, like do you recommend that we check in with you like once a semester? Or is that like completely voluntary, like up to the student?
Well, I think Cal and I both like to see people once a semester if they can get in, and or if you're comfortable with that. Sometimes it's not even an appointment, it's just an email. Sometimes people are just like, "Hey, don't need to meet. I just want to let you know what's going on." And one of us can reply back and give you some advice or insight or say maybe a meeting's important, like something that you should do. There's our link to our Calendly, Natalia, if you want to send this out to your group later. But Callan has these 15-minute appointments that she offers. I don't know how much longer they're going to continue. So those are like quick questions that you can ask. I'm still offering 30-minute appointments, and you can see our calendars booking 3 weeks out. So you can see it up until, I guess, the 11th of February because I'm off work on the 12th. So book away. So if you have trouble finding time to meet with us, send us an email at the pre-health email address too, because we'll try to accommodate people as much as we can. Because I know that there are students in all over right now, so we're trying to be as mindful of that as possible.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great time talking. I think this is my first time meeting you, so definitely nice to meet you.
Well, it's nice to meet you. Yeah. Please, especially you had some really good questions. Please come in, and chat.
I'm glad you see it that way because I'm a little bit inexperienced with the process, so.
Well, that's why we're here.
Like underprepared or anything.
No, that's why we're here, and that's why you're in this group, because this is a really supportive organization. So
awesome. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too. Any other last minute? Before I go tackle dinner? You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This is like real great advice.
Yeah, glad to help. I'm glad we all got to connect. I'm glad it was, you know, a relaxing atmosphere. There's no need for a presentation. So I appreciate the flexibility of doing just kind of like, let's just see what people want to talk about.
No, that was great. Thank you so much for joining us. And
You're welcome.
Yeah, it was really interactive. It was really relaxing as well, like you said.
Yeah. You all have a good group here. That's for sure. I'm very much impressed with everything that you all are doing. So ironically enough, one of my sorority sisters saw on your AMPC's Instagram, my picture, and that prompted her to reach out to me. Because she works in the hospital. So I guess she might have mentored or met with somebody in this group. So I was like, what? You're at GW? Had lost track of this person. So,
Wow.
So small world.
Kristen, is it okay if I ask you, what sorority are you in?
Alpha Sigma Tau. They don't have it at GW.
Yeah, I was at Chi Omega, but I ended up leaving.
That's okay too. Yeah. Yeah. That's totally okay. All right. And now I just have you. The contracts, I'm going to send them out on Monday morning, but we did get Tiffany's contract.